But first, the news. If it's 2 o'clock and you forgot it's 2 o'clock, you forgot everything. One brother said, "It's too simple for me." And another brother said, "It's not too simple for me, but rather too hard to do." A father so advised his son, "It's all right to be stressed as long as you're not too stressed. And it's okay to be loose so long as you're not too loose. But the main thing, above all things, is to stay cognizant." What's cognizant? Don't interrupt me. The main thing is to stay cognizant of, is not to be either too stressed or too loose. And once the time comes when you fully understand what I mean by this, then it becomes a matter of not being either stressed or loose. In the land of the liberated, a man who is anything is a man who is nothing. And on some odd other hand, this points to why, in man's secondary reality, mental reality, titles and individual eccentric descriptions carry such weight and are found so favorable. That's right, notes thoughts. We don't care what you say about us, just as long as you continue to listen to us. What a deal, assume the many, while never analyzing the arrangement or investigating the alternative. In the morning, when it's time to arise, men get out of bed only half awake, and none but the few are later bothered by it. Quoting one man now as opposed to when. Don't interrupt me. Quoting one man now, who explains his problem as he sees it as, "My feet are in Palermo and my head is in Stockholm." A not uncommon problem, wouldn't you say? Assuming we had geography lovers who could look at maps in an allegorical manner. But hey, you can't have everything. Can you have anything? I ask you not to interrupt me. Gazing at his mental activity in a mirror, a man thought, "My desire is to quit talking to ghosts." The mystic's idea of either engagement or non-engagement, the ordinary take to the literal level, believing it has to do with either being physically involved with life or withdrawn therefrom, while the original meaning referred to a man either giving thought to a certain thing or not. Legend tells of another world in which there is a strange river, a river which, if you try to stop its flow, it rushes all the stronger. All thought is flawed, and the more it works to correct itself, the more flawed it becomes. As if it mattered. A curious thing about words in the life of man, you can't say what'll help, only what'll hurt. Note discovered in an ancient grave, the place to look for enlightenment is in what you dislike. The problem, if you'll again pardon me for using such a word, for the few is not in their being a mentally contrived secondary reality, but rather in it overwhelming your primary one. And along comes yet another man with yet another view of his situation. "My feet seem covered in grease, and my head seems covered in glue. Ooh, what's a poor man to do? Ooh." Still one more way you can look at it. Being unenlightened is eating another man's food. As one guy began to more deeply ponder how the same old thoughts that he seemed to have been having for several lifetimes, by their continual replay, stopped any chance for growth or from change or growth from taking place, and served generally just to keep his mental operations gummed up, he started referring to the situation as Gramps has the cramps. All men look in mirrors, but if you attempt to see the nature of mirrors themselves, you find it a most difficult undertaking. Most difficult. Who ask themselves why this is? According to an ancient legend, there was once a man of earth who pondered a certain extreme matter that only he realized. Quote, "Why do men sound more intelligent asking questions than they do attempting to provide answers?" An undocumented postscript to the legend goes on to say that he was either driven from or voluntarily departed that world in the aftermath of his bringing the matter to public attention. I'll bet. Historical spiritual figures are figments of dilettantes' imagination, reflections of what they're pleased to believe was true. Concerned consciousness is sham consciousness. The proper seeking of that certain something is done without haste, hesitation, or anxiety. One man who could talk about enlightenment real good one day thought, if I could do it as good as I talk about it, woo-wee, I'd be a sight to see. Where within us can we hide the truth about ourselves from ourselves? In one place only, and that is the very place for which you seek. The direct simplicity of it continues to fool the contemporary, as well as it did the ancients. Headline, ah, how romantic. One man began to picture any thought he had already had which sought to return as a syphilitic old flame. Ah, how romantic. A man asked a mystic, "Is there such a thing as false awakening?" "Yes," he replied. And after a long silence, the man spoke again. "Well, are you going to tell me what it is?" "Okay," said the mystic. "It's anyone who believes that they are awake." But he was sorry he asked. In the realm of habitation, humans have a unique lair, the mind. And with it comes a situation in which problems that are singular to them appear, which seem to be external to them. This curious manifestation of the mind may in fact be its most significant characteristic to those with that certain interest. Strange, is it not? While all animals die at home, man alone lives a life of ill totally outside his den. Is anyone struck again by the fact that although the mind can unhesitatingly point out human problems, it is never able to come up with any conclusive solutions? Does anyone begin to suspect that believing, in fact, that all the mind is doing is simply pointing out human problems could be at the very heart of their unachievable resolution? In what undiscovered area within you is there a place for another you to hide? Lurking, lurking, always lurking, thinking that you're smarting while all the time you're jerking. I guess sometimes only the writers of these news stories fully appreciate the story. Using, I guess, figuratively. A correspondent writes, "I've got it! I've figured out why I keep running the same thoughts through my mind over and over again. I'm practicing. Simply rehearsing my part so that I'll have them down pat for when the time comes for me to really perform them. That's it. Obviously, that's what I'm doing. What a relief. Well, don't look at me. I mean, if you want to comment on it, you do it. One day, a man looked pensively far away off of a high, steep cliff and sighed, "Man, have I made a mess of my life?" To which life unexpectedly responded by saying, "Oh man, nobody ever gives me credit." And the man, having no interest in that certain matter, didn't get it. Like what else is new whenever life does speak directly to men? Yet another man's private take on the human condition, quote, "Men live simultaneously in two different time zones." Note, hint, fact. A tired man never awakens. Note, hint, fact. Don't be tired. Okay, one more. Note, hint, fact. Only human problems make you tired. One man thought of his personal situation as, "There's a monkey in my tree." To believe that you are studying the correct means to awaken means that you are studying false ideas within an area which contains no false ideas. Well, where did they come from? I hope you'll ask. One man says, "Cows have cuds. Why should men have thoughts?" And then another man, apparently with some nautical military leanings, has come up with his own personal approach to trying to stabilize awareness so as to give it a better opportunity to expand, which he refers to as "clear the flight deck." From yet another vantage point, being enlightened could be seen as the ultimate in energy conservation. Believe it. Note, having the way on your mind is not the same as being on the way. And a boy asked a mystic, "Is a man who can talk real good about enlightenment necessarily enlightened?" And the mystic shook his head in the negative. Then the lad further inquired, "Well, as a man who can talk real good about enlightenment, a man with the specific potential for enlightenment?" And this time the mystic made a motion with his brain receptacle which meant neither yes nor no, and which neither of them had ever seen before. One man just about concluded that the reality of things will slip up on you like a cat on a carpet wearing hush puppies. I'm sure having nothing to do with stockyards. Graffiti found on an overturned column. When awareness is greasy, awakening's easy. Seeking true freedom is not in any way related to seeking approval from anyone. While everyone's always talking about using the mind, one man says he's now begun to think about it more like the mind using him. One critic, well, I guess he's a critic, says that people scrambling after so-called enlightenment are simply people who don't know what to do with their hands. Are we talking about some kind of really weird embarrassment here? A note found scratched on the side of a faraway mountain. Another form of enlightenment is to reverse all of your thoughts and feelings. A man asked a mystic, "Is there a shortcut to enlightenment?" "No," he replied, "but neither is there a long one. So from that you should go forth taking correct measures." The proper way to use the mind is not to use it in any particular way. Headline, chew on this one. From an ordinary man's view, those struggling for enlightenment are the only people on this planet who don't already know what's going on. Don't hurt your teeth. There's always more to everything than can ever be described in words. Note, if there was any validity to humility, only those awake would be humble. Headline, another simplified knee to the groin. Thought makes everyone a fool. Today's tricky trick, act unassuming. No. Let me redo it. Today's tricky trick, act unassuming, then act assumingly. You said would help. One man began to privately sing a little song to himself. From birth to death, it's just you, nobody but you. And one man, with an apparent love for life on the highway, has developed his own approach to staying alert and giving consciousness the chance to evolve, which he calls, "Shut up and drive." Yes, sir? If thought doesn't make a fool of everyone, then tell me what does. Yes, sir. Several times of late we had spoken about the very ancient idea in areas such as this that is verbally put into such words as a more enlightened man, a wise man, a liberated man is a man who takes no action. And I have, on one occasion, taken that to another non-physical, non-literal level, which it is the simplistic analyzation of it, is people who believe that they would be on some mystical quest who would recluse themselves from life to varying degrees, to take the injunction of no action to be no physical action, to try and not get involved in or be engaged in the everyday affairs of life, which accomplishes nothing. Well, I shouldn't say that. It'll keep you from being engaged in the ordinary affairs of life. It'll do that. So, what's wrong with me? But insofar as increasing a man's understanding of what's going on, it will do nothing. And so once already I took it to the level of saying that the original intent, at the very least, always assuming that such things were said initially by someone with interest such as this, that it had a non-secondary intent, that at the very least the original purpose, the original pointing, was to say that a more awakened man would take no action, but it would be that he would take no mental action. That would not be simply that. Of course, the second, every time you start going deeper, the second absorbs the first. So we're assuming that those to whom I am pleased to have their ears for these comments, that they would already understand that there are no actions to be taken in life that would change your consciousness. There is nothing physically to be done that will produce awakening. There is really nothing to be done physically that will encourage awakening. It is only things that you can refrain from doing. Things that you can do that will absolutely bar it, such as alcohol, excessive, constant alcohol or drugs, anger, self-pity, all that sort of thing. In other words, being ordinary. But I will assume that anyone listening to this during a lucid moment, I'll get it right, during a lucidly rancid moment, by now already understands that there's nothing to be done, and so taking the directive of no action that they're already beyond, limiting it to a physical interpretation, that they are no longer concerned, they're no longer deluded, misled into believing that there is some form of behavior, any form of behavior in a series of forms of behavior. That physically the idea that an enlightenment, awakening, the perception at a new level of what's going in life in any way can be affected by physical activity, that is simply an illusion. So we'll assume that you're past that. Then you would be the next level that I had already pointed out in some days past, was that another analyzation of a more useful, personal point would be that a more awakened man does not think, that the no action referred to is that he no longer looks out at life, the external world, and thinks about it. Because if you're thinking about it, you are as deluded, you are as much in the dark, captive, asleep, as you would be if you were out there with a hands-on entanglement with it. There is no difference. That kind of idea, again, is, without being understood, is very prevalent verbally in all the world's major religions, the idea that in a man's heart, I think in the Bible somewhere it's about, but the old idea, it's everywhere, that in a man's heart is where everything lies, and then they turn it into all sorts of metaphysical, non-useful and speculations. But what it is saying is that if you are going to get entangled physically with the external world, which serves no purpose unless you're ordinary, and then you must do it, and so you wouldn't be listening to this anyway. Your only idea would be to take it selectively and say, well, yes, there's some things that I shouldn't get involved with, and the only thing an ordinary mind would point out would be things in which you have no interest, or else entanglements that amount to confrontations in which you believe that you would not prevail. But the ordinary mind cannot in any way take, even physically, the idea of no action, no involvement. They cannot even see that, so they wouldn't be listening and arguing with us, but I pointed out so that you'd see the inclinations naturally of your own thinking. But what I was going to say was that as a common idea, even not properly or not understood to the point of it having any usefulness, is that as a man thinks in his heart or soul, whatever they call it in religion, but in his mind, whatever you're thinking, you might as well be doing. The point being, at the operational level to push your awareness of life, if you're going to think about what's going on, if you're going to sit there and argue in your mind, if you're going to debate, if you're going to criticize and correct other ideas, other people's words, you might as well be out there spending your time, instead of coming here, for instance, or watching this on television, that you might as well be going out somewhere and arguing with politicians, priests, rabbis, anybody. You might as well physically be acting a fool, because it's the same thing. You might as well physically, I guess I may coin a new term, allegorically physically, you might as well be poking your own eyes out if you're thinking about blindness, because that's what you're doing. What I'm getting to tonight is even another level of it, of no action. Now consider that this will be the third. Easily identifiable. It's not just an idea. You see it and it's a fact. It's not just a speculation or some strange description I came up with. If you were trying to pursue the idea that a wiser man, the ideas of enlightenment and awakening, all that, you can even dispense with and say that a wise man, a sagacious man, a man with some understanding of life, understands that the best course of action is no action. And again, ordinary minds would, at best, take that selectively. They might say, well, in some instances you're right, but that means nothing. You have to see, a really wise man sees that the only proper course of action is no action, which the words, I grant you, even to many people who can think beyond the literal, at first sound off-putting, that you think, well, you've got to do something. Because the first thing the mind wants to do is to take all ideas to their extreme, and to hear that there's no action, then the mind immediately imagines a man who has gone off to meditate or sit under a tree and probably now makes, what was that figure? Jabba the Hutt looks svelte. That you just sit somewhere and you just turned into a glob. You turned into a passive, pensive glob. Nothing left of you from doing nothing. And that's not it. But, as I said, you can easily understand that there are two, and I think you'll see the third level, but to say that a wise man, that he sees the proper course of action in life, and if you're still a child, you can put in parentheses, in most cases, or if you're really kindergarten, in some cases. Do the best you can to swallow it, allegorically. That a wise man sees as the proper course of action, in most cases, in many cases, in all cases, is no action. And you can see that physically. That you being involved, if your interest is in awakening, not if your interest is in becoming famous, getting along in the world, just being ordinary. This is not true. It's just ridiculous. But if your interest is in seeing what's going on in life, the proper course is no action physically. Because if you're involved with a secondary reality, which is of course what I refer to when I say the world, we're referring to the invented reality from man's mind, the secondary reality. That's where the no action takes place, because it's not a matter of no action physically in the primary world, because you die. It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with not eating. It has nothing to do with refraining from sex, going without sleep. It has nothing to do with actions that would be detrimental to physical survival, which is the primary reality. But to say that a man, a wise man, or an awakened, more awakened man, sees that the proper course of action is no action, that means in the secondary realm, in the secondary reality. Because he knows, he alone, you alone, if you know it, you can't do it by theory, you can't even try it. But if you see what the secondary reality is, that it's real if you live in it. It's real if that's all that you demand. But once you see what it is, you know that being in there and being active has no effect on anything. It might as well all be you can't find it, of course, you can't find a copy of the script, but it might as well be a scripted play. I guess you can scratch that. I never like to say that, because it gives some people the heebie-jeebies. You can see that your action, if you see the secondary reality, that your action therein has no effect on what happens. It's only if you're completely submerged in it that you believe that your participation is in any way warranted and in any way has an impact on things. If you're in there, you believe that. Or if you want the real way, if you're in there, it does. But you got to remember, it's all an imaginary world. And if you're in there, what you do seems to have an effect, except the whole place is imaginary. And so having an effect over there, that's the whole idea of all the things, again, that religion takes as a very crude level, but the whole idea about all the kinds of benefits and successes and rewards that a man may gain in the carnal world will do him no good in the spiritual world. Or put it at the real crude level, a man who becomes rich and famous by God, it won't get him into heaven, which of course makes all the unknown poor people go, yeah, I'll join up, I'll buy that. But that's not what the reality, not the original was. The original was that, and it says, when ordinary proverbial wisdom or spiritual so-called script speaks about the uselessness, the vacuousness of worldly acclaim and worldly success, it's got nothing to do with the reality of it, the usefulness. It has nothing to do with how rich you are, what kind of car you have, or possessions. What it's referring to is, if your whole world of consciousness is in the secondary realm, secondary reality, which is the world of is the world as they refer to it. If that is where your sense of consciousness is, then it doesn't matter what you do. That's what it's really saying. It doesn't matter what you do. Whatever you do fits. But whatever you do in there, even if it seems to have some impact, it has no impact. Even if what you do seems to have some effect, that is, for instance, you can get rich. Again, reminding you, it has nothing to do with not getting rich. But if you get rich, and your feeling is, which everyone's is, that, well, now I can move to another neighborhood or a new kind of house, it will change me, it will change the way I feel, and of course it won't. And by feeling, I mean human emotion. It'll change the way you feel. Because if you lived in a shack with no windows, when you were poor and now you move into a nice home, physically it'll make you feel better. But we're speaking about some other realm. So a person would know, or should know by now, that there is nothing to be done that will encourage in any way or will even affect a person's understanding through any physical activity. So that would be the first level of no action. The second would be to understand that no action also, at another level, at a more intense level, a more useful level, refers to the fact that a man, if he understands anything, if he's wise at all, if he sees anything about life, he knows that it's an absolute same waste of time. In fact, it's even worse, but it's at least as bad for him to be thinking about the secondary reality. That should be the no action. Because there are all sorts of excuses or explanations you can say. A person could say, well, I am now a man of less action. That means I'm wiser, I'm less involved with life. Well, one thing is, hell, you're older, you're tireder, you're less interested. And as I said, you can be selective and say, well, there are all sorts of things I don't pursue anymore. Yeah, you don't try to pick up certain types of women in bars anymore, younger women, because now the younger men will whip your ass. And so now you can say, yeah, but I got over that. No, you didn't, you got old. Whatever it is, you can say, well, I quit doing it. It could be that you got rebuffed. It could be that it never minded anything. So you could point out, well, I quit getting physically entangled in certain things. So I am a man of less action. But back to, I'll finally get past the second level, but you still may be thinking about it. And if you're thinking about it, it doesn't offend God, it doesn't offend any religion. It's not that. It's that you are still blind. You still believe it has some consequence, or you wouldn't be thinking about it. And it doesn't matter. You can say, oh no, I know that most of it's bullshit. Where do you get this most? How do we get to talk about most? That's the selectivity. That is what ordinary people call an insightful person. Yes, I see that most of the time. Well, no need to go any further, sir. You've told me all I need to know. Well, you told me enough when you opened your mouth. If you're thinking about anything, that's taking action. That is taking action. That is, as I said, it's really the first level of any consequence to anyone pursuing this, because the first level of physically refraining from useless action, which all action in the secondary reality, insofar as being more awake, is concerned, is all useless. And so that's a child's play. So the first real level of any significance to someone attempting this is that to finally understand to the point that you can use it. Because I'll assume that almost anyone that's been involved with this for any length of time immediately agrees, yeah, you're right. I understand that I should not be thinking about, or that's a waste of time. It's not that you shouldn't be. You understand what I mean? But that you know that it's a waste of time. If I'm thinking about the secondary reality, if I'm thinking about the external world, things I cannot touch, if I'm thinking about it, I am wasting my time. And I don't care what it is. You could be thinking about, I wish I had met Jesus or Buddha. I wish that I could go to find a secret mystical school somewhere. I don't care if you're thinking what you consider to be important thoughts. You're still blind. You still don't understand what's going on. There's nothing to think about. If you're thinking, you're an idiot. You're asleep, you're in prison, you're crazy, you're a fool. Anything else, add your own, if mine are not either harsh or descriptive enough. Apt. I always like apt. I guess because it's so close to ape. But anyway. Little metaphysical, zoological humor. Well, minus, of course, the laughs. All right, so that would be the second level. That's the level, no matter how you look at it, that is a level at which many, many people involved with this never get past, or past which they never get, according to whether you like to hear me speak or Winston Churchill. That's the point past which most people never get. That you can wrestle with that forever, because I will grant you, there's no doubt, it is an extremely viscid point to reach. That to even get over that line and to begin to see, on occasions, to just have flashes and you see clearly on your own, not by something I said or not based upon some belief, but you see clearly that if you're thinking about, can we all spell now together, hold up your cards, anything. That's anything. And if you look right where it says anything right up here on the screen, you notice there's no asterisk. There's no reference to footnotes that give conditions, to give exceptions. It says N-E-T-H-I-N-G. thing, anything, that you can get your own personal, absolute, nonverbal, frontal nudity view of everything that you think is useless. No matter what it is, if it's a thought, it's a waste of time insofar as understanding life. You can have more than one or two good, full views of that and still not have the freedom or the ability, whatever you want, however you care to phrase it, the strength, the power, the ability to use this constantly, or I should say uninterruptedly, or constantly. Again, whichever one makes you breathe easiest for the moment. Pardon me. That was a little wheezing humor. But again, to balance it out with the zoological bit, again, minus the ha. Okay. But now, up to the third level, finally. This one absorbs all of them. Well, I shouldn't say that. This one actually goes off to the side. It gets more useful. The third way of looking at the idea of a more awakened man, a more conscious man, would be a man of no action. Would be past, the no action referring to physical. Past, it referring specifically to the no action being no thinking about the external, secondary world. This now is all internal. A third level, a third depth of the interpretation, the view of a wise man or a more conscious man would be a man of no action, is now all internal, all private to him, and that is the no action refers to that he does not respond to his own thoughts. There, I always try to be as technically correct as possible since I make all this up. It's my world, but I see when it starts to, if you're an ordinary mind was looking at it, when it gets non-sequential, is why I say that's not really a third depth in the same way that I went from 1 to 2. It goes off to the side. It's more useful. It really transcends a description because I don't know of what use this could be theoretically. I don't even see how it could be very interesting verbally. It's not really interesting. It's ball busting if you see it, because it's something to do. The alternative, of course, being what people try to do in many cases that are stuck at the first and second level, that they perceive that what goes on in the head, the home of the secondary reality of man, that they perceive is to be the hindrance to a more direct perception of life. Or they may accept someone's idea, they may read or hear somewhere that thought itself is the impediment to awakening. And so then they will actually recluse themselves from life, such as the monastic setting, at level 1, and take up such things as meditation. Probably the oldest known discipline that claims to be in active pursuit of this, which is based upon the fact that they either hear, well, at that level they are taking it on faith, but it strikes them as being correct when they hear that it's human thought. From place to place and time to time, the descriptions vary, the stirring of the human spirit, and etc. A man's entanglement with the carnal world. It's called all sorts of things, but many people can perceive, or they have the feel of correctness when they hear the idea that it is thought. Uncontrollable, running thought, not in particular, but just the uncontrollableness of human thought in consciousness, in the head, that is the impediment to awakening. It is that keeps a man from another level of perception as to what's going on. And so it's just very common, as you all know, to say, well, the way to go about this, and somebody hears it and go, what'll I do? I like the idea, what'll I do? And they go, well, let's be still. First level, no action physically. It's best if you get out of life, if you really remove yourself from the common marketplace, that is the secondary world, but they take it down to the primary world, is to take yourself physically out of ordinary circumstance. Come here, there's a group of us of like interest, and we will all sit around together, and many hours a day, many hours, we will sit motionless, because that helps still the mind itself. It's hard to still the mind if you're all frantic physically. So first off, we sit down. We take up a still pose, sitting or standing, whatever you do, but the classic sitting zazen meditation, and you sit. And they say what we're trying to do now is to calm the mind. And after that, there are variations that the so-called mystical schools and disciplines, some of them say that there is not much to say past that point, not many directions, just sit and it'll eventually happen. And then others say, well, you should be actively trying to suppress every thought as it pops up, shoot it down. And there are others that say what you should do is try and ignore it. And the details after that doesn't matter to what I'm pointing to. What I'm pointing to is that it is very common, that it is just the rule, that if anyone gets anywhere with this sort of activity at any time, at any place, if they are in any way wired up to understand what this is, they will eventually come to, either on their own or by other directions, and them acquiescing to it, they will come to the view that it is the human mind, the uncontrollable flow of thought, that at least, if it's not the one impediment to another state of consciousness, it is a hindrance which must be overcome, which must be passed to get anywhere else. So the third level, see, now notice the first two, that just non-physical action will not change a person's understanding, their perception of life. It will not change your level of consciousness. Because if it would, simply all you have to do, you could forget going to a monastery and to put up with whatever phony baloney rules they got and probably pay rent. Go out and lay down in the yard and just lay there. If you lay there long enough, it'd be nice maybe if you had a manservant or someone to come feed you, change your diapers. But if you just lay there long enough, I don't know why it was foolish for me to add anything additionally foolish to make it look foolish. The point is, if non-action physically would awaken a man, all you would literally have to do is go somewhere, sit, lay. I'd suggest lay. Why not? Lay down and don't move, and eventually you would become enlightened, literally. I mean, I don't need to make it any more foolish. Foolish me for even making it sound more foolish. But that's what most people try, if they get involved at all. And as I said, some people get past the point that they do perceive that it's not, that lack of physical action is not going to change my state of consciousness. It may stop me from making hand gestures. Yeah, but you can shoot your hand off and stop that. Oh. But what about that guy in the news tonight? That just struck me. That said his view of people that were struggling for enlightenment were simply people who didn't know what to do with their hands. Nobody understands that metaphorically? Okay. So the second level would be to consider that a more awakened man would take no action. He would not think about taking action. He would not think about the sorts of things in life that if he were there, he would be taking action. This third level off to the side, it is not actually sequential in the arrangement as I verbally have proposed it. But this third level would be that he takes no action in regard to the thoughts that do flow through him. No action. Just take no action. That would be, in this case, that would be his method. That if he had gone through, if we wanted to scrunch it up and condense some sort of temporal sequence and say, well, here's a man who read about the idea of being that man is asleep or in the dark or in captivity, and there are certain things that some people can do that will result in awakening, freedom, enlightenment. And he tracks down some group that says, yes, we're involved with that. And they say, do not move, take no physical action. So he tries that. We're going to condense it real quick. And then he gets through that. And again, either on his own or someone does finally point out to him, that's not getting you anywhere. That maybe got you out of life, got you out of work. But the no action is going to have to be, if you're going to get anywhere, is going to have to be in reference to thought. You cannot be thinking. That anytime you're thinking about the secondary world, anything you're thinking about anything, you're not going to awaken. It is an absolute impediment. So if he gets past that and then he gets to the point of, all right, now what do I do with that? Then the general, as I said, the general methods have been in some way to oppose thought, to try and change thought, even those who say that their aim is those groups of people, which doesn't mean they understand it, because all you got to do is adopt it from many thousands of years and thousands of areas, that they adopt the idea that the ultimate in some way is to stop thought. Or put another way, if you do awaken thought, will no longer be the mode by which you perceive reality. And so to turn that around and use the result as a method, then it's easy to say, well, what we're trying to do is stop thought. If that's going to be the end result, if that is a man's state of consciousness, if he is more awake, is to be not looking through thought, then why not let's go ahead and directly approach it and use the result as we hear it to be. Let's use the result as a method. Let's try and stop thought. And there was a news item again tonight, if you caught it, that said there is a strange world on which there is another world on which there is a strange river. A river which, if you attempt to stop its flow, simply rushes all the stronger. You knew I wasn't talking about other planets and rivers, surely. Unless you're damnable. I'm sorry. Figuratively speaking. Anyone who understood this third method, the third level, the way I'm putting it tonight, we could speculate, or I could go ahead and say that he would then develop his own personal approach to it as offering no resistance, which I almost started out tonight on that basis, as opposed to these levels of interpreting the idea of no action. No resistance. I can cover it real quick. Everyone knows that is another old idea, open to all the way from childish literal interpretations, because it is very common in religion, then it's become common in political situations, generally referred to as civil disobedience, nonviolent disobedience. It's been used, and religions, of course, teach it. That we should love our enemies, not resist those who mistreat you, and etc. That the idea has been taken, again, the same as I did with no action. The majority of people who ever hear it, if they gave it any attention at all, then they assume it was meant physically. But you might notice this, taking the idea of no resistance to the physical level has built in a very self-limiting factor, because of the fact that the idea of physical lack of resistance, the idea has enjoyed extremely limited execution. That is, those who actually physically, or who believe that it is meant physically and offer no resistance, and about the only time it comes up, or the extreme time, would be when they find themselves in a physical confrontation. Since the idea of no physical resistance, as I said, the idea has limited appeal. It has built-in self-regulating factors, because if you attempt to engage in non-physical resistance, there's almost it's damn near 100% certainty that that's the end of you. Very few people attempt to practice this, and those who do are, shall we say, short-lived, because what you're faced with is hardly anyone else. And the chances, even if there are 2 or 3 or 10 other people or 1,000 people on the planet at any given time who are actually attempting to practice physical non-resistance, do you understand, due to the size of this planet and the number of people, and you find yourself in a physical confrontation with another human, do you know what the odds are that this other person will likewise, I assume someone would get where this is going, the odds are that the other person is likewise physically non-resistive, that is, non-violent. Even though no one, I'll assume you get that. So it has a built-in limiting factor, but the idea still remains. In the same way that even physically, as I point out, the literal-minded, those that are not actually going anywhere with this sort of activity, they take the idea of no action. They take the idea as meant physically, literally, even though they don't engage in it. You know how few people actually go off and retire from life to attempt to in some way become enlightened or awakened. Many more people would pay some lip service to it and go, well, I bet that's a good idea, or I bet that's the way to do it, or I bet that, I wish I had time, etc. But very few people do it. Similarly, what I'm saying is the idea of no resistance taken physically, many people will pay lip service to it and say, yes, that's the way we should do. But very few people attempt it. Humanity could not attempt it in general. It would be self-destructive. So you have, in that case, the level, whereas the idea of non-resistance is taken that way. But now, this, I won't go through two levels. Let's just turn it all internally and personally. What I was describing, to tie this back to the third type of analyzation and use of the idea of no action, would be a man taking no action himself, internally, privately. No one knows what you're doing but you, and you just damn near have any grasp of it yourself. But you take no action in regard to your thinking. Remember, you're taking no physical action to the external world. You're taking, now we'll assume, to the point that at least you know that you should not be. For your own benefit, you should not be taking any action, that is, thinking about it, but you keep doing it. But then another way to look at it is quit resisting, that is, quit taking action about your own thinking. Quit having any thought about your own thinking. That would be absolutely going limp. That would be the internal, nonviolent resistance to thinking. But there's nothing to say after that. You can't describe anything. There is no point to it. There is no outcome to it. You're not actually opposing anything. I can't carry the parallel, the analogy, the metaphor any further. I can't say, well, all right, go limp. Play like you're being physically nonviolent, civil. You're being civilly disobedient to thought. Just go limp and fall down. But then if you wait, well, thought's going to finally get tired of me, or thought's going to go, what are you doing? Or thought's going to arrest me, or thought's going to get the point. Wake up. There is nothing to say after that. If you picture an outcome, you're thinking again. You've become rigid. You stood up, and they're going to pistol whip you, metaphorically speaking. You're going to get hurt again. You're going to be back in handcuffs. You're going to be back under the auspices of the authorities. That is, the external world. You'll never understand that that's a waste of time. You'll never understand that you cannot be conscious, whatever you want to call it. The old idea is awakening, enlightened. It's silly. I mean, it's no sense to engage in any further hyperbole. It is ridiculous. It's not true. It's not so. You cannot be thinking about the external world, anything, and be enlightened, and be awake, and be more conscious, and know what's going on. Let's take the lesser descriptions. You will never understand what's going on in life. Nothing. You can continue to play in the secondary world and cannibalize yourself and other people and play anagrams. You take, people ask questions, you switch answers around. It's all theory. It's all talk. It's all a game. There's no way in. There's no way out, except seeing what it is. So there's nothing to think about. The only thing to think about, and of course now I should wash out your ears for listening to this. The only thing to think about is the fact that I shouldn't be thinking about this. So, in conclusion, let me wrap it up. Did you have enough sense to fade that out?